Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Winning Play Podcast. I'm Drew James here with my co-hosts Kendall Capps and Robb Hue. We're here to break down last week's conference title games. Had one not-so-good game, one classic for the ages, guys. Let's start off in the NFC in the morning. The Eagles taking down the Commanders 55-23, the most points scored in a playoff game since 2000. Rob, I'm going to kick it off to you first here. What'd you see in this first game? How the Eagles take it? What were your takeaways here?
I saw the best running back in the NFL run against one of the worst run defenses in the NFL that had been overperforming the previous two playoff games. I saw what should be on paper happen, which is rookie QB goes against the number one defense in the NFL and the number one, one of the top O-lines and one of the best wide receiver duos and the best running back in the NFL, as I said, against a struggling defense. And it popped off. This was the best game that the Eagles have probably played all season.
Even though I have to say, for the rookie going on the road in an NFC championship game, he was not even close to the reason why they lost.
Not at all.
He played phenomenal in that game. What did he throw for 250, 275? And he had 3 fumbles. He completed 3 passes on 3 plays and had 3 guys just cough up the ball in crucial situations. And knowing their defense couldn't stop Philadelphia and couldn't stop the ground game. And it wasn't even Saquon. Saquon actually had the least amount of touches that he's had all season in that game. Because Dallas Goedert had 30 yards rushing in that game. Their tight end, everybody was running. Their backup running back that no one's ever heard of. I'm sorry, their third string running back ran for $140 in that game. It was ridiculous.
Will Shipley?
Will Shipley, the kid out, I think Clemson, right?
He's a rookie. Yeah, he's a rookie.
Yeah. And, I give mad props to Jaden Daniels because he didn't back down and he made all the throws and he tried keeping him in that game as long as he could. But at some point, it's when your defense has given up score after score after score, it's hard to match when your guys are putting the ball on the ground.
Yeah, I saw the same player. I saw Jaden Daniels has been the same player in all 3 playoff games. I don't know if he's necessarily elevated since the first round, but he's the same player, and that's what you want to see out of a rookie.
I think that brings us to a good question here. Is this the greatest rookie season we've ever seen?
Yeah, without a doubt.
Quarterback or
without
by
a doubt
anybody?
for me. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I'm sure there are maybe some players that we've seen at different positions that aren't maybe skill positions that were phenomenal rookies. There might be some left tackle that just came out, boom, gangbuster. But among the positions that are pivotal that everyone is able to see with their eyeballs on every game, I can't think of a better rookie season. To step up his game, he was already, I think, the first rookie ever to win 2 road playoff games, right? So
well, I assume this question was for quarterbacks, right? Because we're not going to compare apples to oranges.
Well, he said any position.
You could say any, but I mean, you're talking about running backs. You're probably talking about Marshawn Lynch and Jamal Lewis, but guys that weren't going to the Super Bowl, but just had really good rookie seasons. Quarterbacks, one that stands out to me would be Ben Roethlisberger, who also went to the AFC title game his rookie season. I don't know.
And he only lost 1 game that year, I believe, in the regular season.
And so you could say Dan Marino, but that's not playoff. That's regular season. And the stats are still not quite the same. I mean, to me, Jaden's got it pretty clearly at this point.
Yeah, those are the 2 more further back comps. I mean, the more recent ones are Andrew Luck and C.J. Stroud, but they just didn't have the playoff success. And then Jaden also has 11 wins. So, I mean, it's I feel like after his second road victory in the playoffs, it probably cemented him as the greatest rookie QB season of all time.
Yeah, and maybe above all else, the thing that I'm most impressed with him is the moment at no point does it seem too big for him. He doesn't seem, whether there's pressure coming at him, he has time, he's going through his reads, he's utilizing his legs. It's just really impressive, time and again, watching that guy play. And I'm really excited to see what he does going forward in his career. And I love the tiny slice of karma that the former Commanders owner, Daniel Snyder, the douchebag that he is, was forced to sell the team. The other owners were like, all right, you've given the league a black eye for far too long, allegedly videotaping cheerleaders in the locker room and all this other stuff. Let's get you out of here. And as soon as he's gone, new ownership, boom, they hit a home run with this kid. And the future obviously looks really, really bright in Washington.
Yeah, when you think about Jaden too, it's crazy because he was not this guy at ASU. He was pretty good, but then he transfers over to LSU, kind of plays the eligibility game in college, and he really stepped up that final year. And you got to remember, too, he is old for a rookie. It kind of hasn't been talked about as being a knock or anything, which I've been a little surprised. But he's old. This year, playing against Jalen Hurts, he's as old as Jalen Hurts was when they made it to the Super Bowl. So, I mean, it's pretty interesting to see that. And I think you're seeing a little bit of that extra year or two that he was able to squeeze out in college, and that experience, because he's just cool as a cucumber, man. He's the exact same guy every game, no matter how big the moment is. So, the future's bright for those guys.
Well, looking over at the other side, one thing about the Eagles, I saw this was Jalen Hurts' best game of the season by far. Is that something that's a product of the Washington defense? Is that just a product of how successful Saquon has been? Or is this Eagles passing game finding their stride? And is that going to be a problem here in the big game coming up?
Well, I feel like we've seen from time to time throughout Jalen Hurts' career, a la that Super Bowl loss to the Chiefs, which I would argue is probably the best performance he's ever had that I've witnessed. When teams are stacking the box, which Washington tried to do early, and they left their corners on an island. Marshawn Lattimore, they're like, hey, man, you're supposed to be the shutdown corner. You go take care of A.J. Brown. And he lost that matchup time and again, like getting toasted. There was one particular drive. It was like a pass interference, a 30-yard completion, a 20-yard completion, another pass interference. Then they gave up the touchdown. And that was like 5 plays on one drive. It's hard, because the Eagles have legit elite receivers on the outside. And when you're just dedicating so many guys to the box to try to slow down the run, which even that they weren't able to do, it makes it a little bit easier for Jalen. But I was probably even more impressed. He looked so much better running the football than I thought he would, coming off that knee injury he sustained the week prior against the Rams. I thought he was going to be hampered, he had 6 days to rest it up, and he couldn't move at the end of that Rams game, and he looked really, really good.
Yeah, sometimes you wake up and you just have it. And Jalen Hurts woke up that morning, and he had it that morning, and he busted that big run for a touchdown. And, it's kind of like in basketball. You got to see the ball go in, so you drive into the hoop, and then your shot opens up. And that's what it kind of felt like for Jalen, which is where he busted that big run. He was feeling good. He was in a rhythm. He was confident. He wasn't thinking, and he was just lights out passing, which has been kind of his up and down skill set at the quarterback position, is whether or not he's got it as a passer today. Also, whether or not A.J. Brown is going to catch the balls he throws as well. But I will say, Lattimore officially calling it washed. And he's always been a DPI merchant anyway, but it was especially on display now that he's a little older, and maybe he's still not recovered from the hamstring, but he just looks washed. And there's a reason why the Saints, even though he was like one of their cornerstone players, was happy to move on from him.
Yep.
So Washington's in trouble. They're gonna be definitely addressing the defensive side of the ball, probably get another wide receiver weapon for Jaden, but besides that, they're going to need to address that defense, because at the end of the day, this was a pretty mediocre defense the whole season, and I do think they overperformed a little bit in the Lions game. Not so much actually in the Bucs game. The Bucs just didn't have the ball, but when they had the ball, they moved down at will. So it was a little bit of a hidden context there, creating 5 turnovers against Detroit, and then that defense showed up against the Eagles and got blown out.
Well, while we're talking about greatest stuff of all time, I have a question for you guys. Has Saquon Barkley is he having the greatest running back season of all time? I think this is a very, very valid question, and I'm going to say yes. Some stats, the most 60-yard plus touchdowns of all time. He passed Terrell Davis now for the most total yards, including playoffs, in a season all time. In the playoffs, he's been unstoppable. Another 3 TDs this week. Is there any way he doesn't slot into that top spot right now?
It's hard to, obviously there's a few seasons that you could look at that you could compare it to. ED back in the day with the Rams, Terrell Davis you touched on. But Terrell Davis had John Elway at quarterback, Rod Smith and Ed McCaffrey at receiver. Like, they were loaded in an unbelievable offensive line as well. Not that this line, obviously, this line
has an unbelievable.
That's true. That's fair. And some good receivers. So, you could certainly compare those two. But I think that fact, that 60-yard touchdown, that just goes to show that he has the ability to change the game on any given play. And you look at the beginning of this game this week, Washington opens the game on an 18-play drive. Like, they're saying, hey, we're game. We're not just going to back down. They go all the way down the field, ultimately kick a field goal, which was really interesting considering they had gone for 2 4th downs and got them earlier. Then on 4th and 3, they decided to kick the field goal. But I digress. And then, one play from Saquon. Oh, no, don't worry. We got the lead. It's like his ability. And then on one of his other long runs, when he gets through the line, his ability to explode when he hits that second level. And before the safety even has a chance to try to take an angle, it's too late half the time. So I'm with you. I think I got to say, this is probably the most impressive individual season I've ever seen from a running back.
Guys, and we're saying this on a team where he's gotten at least 10 touchdowns poached from him. He he would have had absurd touchdown numbers if they didn't do a tush push, or brotherly shove or whatever. I mean, it would be ridiculous because my mind goes to like the LaDainian Tomlinson year where he had 1 million touchdowns doing it all. On those Chargers. I mean, and Saquon could have he could have pressed for around those numbers. Every one of these rushing touchdowns from Jalen Hurts, probably all of them except for 3 were tush pushes. So I mean, it's it's pretty insane, and it just goes to show you what situations do, because we all remember what a generational prospect he was coming out of college. But in order to have historic seasons, and we've kind of talked about this behind the scenes, but in order to have historic seasons or players with huge legacy, it's fantastic players and skills put into great situations. Very rarely will you have a fantastic player in a bad situation and have something historic happen. We're also looking at Derrick Henry with this Baltimore team.
Two of those that you're talking about would be up there for greatest seasons ever, which would be OJ's 2,000-yard season on a 14-game schedule, the only NFL MVP to not make the playoffs. Wild. The team was still so bad they couldn't make the playoffs. And then Barry Sanders in 97, who went over 2,000 yards. And the team wasn't good, but they made the playoffs, which for the Lions at that time was harder than winning the Super Bowl is for most teams. Those are the only two that have done it without those great teams. And the other ones, like Terrell Davis, you said, had John Elway, or the 2000 season by Marshall Faulk, which has got to be up there. But he had the greatest show on turf as well.
I would say the Adrian Peterson season when he ran for 2,000, that offense wasn't loaded. I remember they went into week 17, the final week of that season against Green Bay, having to win, and he needed 206 yards to get to 2,000, and he ran for 230. And there were several times that season that, teams would stack the box and you couldn't stop them. But the difference between, I feel like, this season for Saquon and that season for AP, because AP was similar in that when he hit that hole, he was just gone. But we didn't see him do that in the postseason. We're watching Saquon do this all the way to the Super Bowl.
Over again in the postseason.
And to be honest, the way the Eagles need to play is they need to just keep feeding him regardless of what the averages say. Because as you alluded to, Kendall, the Chiefs will want to stop Saquon. That's what their game plan is going to be going into it. They're going to want Jalen to have to beat them with his arm. But the thing is, even if Saquon's only getting 2 or 3 yards and it's 8, 9, 10 rushes where it only gets 2 or 3, it doesn't matter, because all it's going to take is one play where the offensive line allows him to get to the second level. He makes one linebacker miss. And then it's game. And then by the time he's done at the end of the game, he's averaging 8 yards a carry. You know what I mean? So the averages, it doesn't really matter, is my point. You just need to keep feeding him, knowing that all he needs is one little crease, and he's gone.
That offensive line has given him creases. Did you guys see the block on that 60-yard run he had this week? Guy picked up A.J. Brown and threw him into picked up
Marshawn,
and threw him into 2 defenders, knocking both defenders down, pancaked 3 guys on the same block. It's a tough world out there trying to tackle Saquon.
Yeah, that was probably the most brutal Lattimore game of his career. That was embarrassing.
It looked like maybe it's time to retire.
The whole game was embarrassing.
Yes.
They basically
and Robb
were
was loving it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, let's move on over to the AFC, our big game of the year that isn't the Super Bowl for sure. I think we've got the Bills losing to the Chiefs 29-32. This kind of looked like every other game between the Chiefs and Bills. It was going to come down to the end, except Josh Allen couldn't keep scoring. The Chiefs defense actually came up with the stops this time. It's the 4th straight loss in the playoffs for the Bills to Mahomes. Kendall, let's start with you here. What were your main takeaways off this game?
I mean, you touched on some of it already, which is this game looked eerily similar to just about every other playoff game that we've seen between these two teams, which, side note, the Bills now the first team in NFL history to be eliminated by the same opponent 4 times within a 5-year span. They're the only team that's ever happened against. So, they might be 4-1 in the regular season against Mahomes, but last week we talked about that monkey being on Lamar Jackson's shoulders going into next season, that he can't perform in the playoffs. The same monkey is just as big on Josh Allen's shoulders now, that you just aren't going to ever beat this guy. You can't beat them. It was one thing the previous, but this was the one where, hey, you have the ball in your hands, down by 3 with 3:30 left on the clock and 2 timeouts. Go win the game. Make your case that you're the man, that you're going to beat the Chiefs. You're going to beat the champs. And he said after the game, we had to beat the champs if we want to beat the champs. They had their opportunity. Some people were complaining about ref calls. I'm sorry, there were 5 fumbles in that game. Buffalo recovered all 5 fumbles. Buffalo had more than enough breaks in that game. At the end of the day, they had the ball in their hands with 3.5 to go, and they came up small.
Yeah, and this showed a little bit one of the undercurrent narratives that's not being talked about is when Hollywood Brown came back to this team, they were able to move Xavier Worthy inside to where Rashee Rice was playing. And Worthy's pretty small, and he's a little bit underdeveloped in route running and stuff. So it allows them to move him inside and move him around and manufacture touches. And really, this was Josh versus Mahomes. That is true. But it was really Josh and Joe Brady versus Mahomes and Andy Reid, because Andy Reid was scheming guys wide open all over the field, and they didn't even need Travis Kelce. You could tell the Bills dedicated a lot of attention to Travis Kelce, and they were happy to just let him take the attention. And, I mean, Worthy was wide open on, like, a touchdown here and other things there. Then there were some broken tackles, and the next thing you know, Juju Smith-Schuster, the decrepit
corpse, getting open.
Big catches.
Yeah. I mean, they're working with an army of the dead at the wide receiver core, and then a young gun, So I mean, there was a lot there, and then similar to the past couple of years with Lamar and the Ravens in the playoffs, and you're looking at Jim Harbaugh and whoever the offensive coordinator is at the time. I had a problem with Joe Brady's game plan. He seemed to get away from the run, which was their bread and butter and the foundation on which they ran their offense all year. And this Chiefs run defense, which was like one of the best in the league, in the playoffs has shown a little bit more vulnerability, and we'll get to that later versus the Eagles. But they've shown a little bit more vulnerability, and it seemed like it was working, and they kind of got away from it. And then I just wasn't a fan at all of Joe Brady's lack of adjustment to the blitz, because the Chiefs D-line just absolutely destroyed the Bills O-line in the most crucial moments over and over and over and over and over again.
I got a stat on that. Chiefs generated 16 pressures, and Josh Allen was 4 of 13 on those plays.
Yeah, because, I mean, the pressures didn't come because he was standing in the pocket for too long. The pressures came
they were
immediately,
unblocked guys.
And it was like 3 dudes every time. And, I mean, we'll play this game about whether Josh gets the benefit versus Lamar and all that stuff. But, in that one crucial drop pass by Kincaid, I'm not going to sit there and say it was the easiest catch. The All-22 showed a little bit harder than what it seemed like. But Josh is running backwards 4 dudes. There's a picture of it.
If he makes that catch, it's one of the greatest throws of all time. He makes that catch and they come down to win.
Yep.
He made the throw. So I mean, and then Kincaid hadn't showed up all game. It's tough. It's tough for that. But you don't want to sit and look at that.
To me, in that situation, how many years now do we need to see the Chiefs in a close playoff game and their defense is on the field and it's a crucial third or a fourth down with potentially the game on the line? What does Spagnuolo do every single time? Bring in at least 5-6 guys every single time. Now, granted, he disguised where it was coming from very well, and he had 3 guys looking like they were coming off the left end, and the Bills actually shifted their offensive line pre-snap to the left. And then they brought a corner blitz from the other side, which Josh and no one saw coming. But nevertheless, if you look at the route tree for 3 of the 4 receivers, one of them, Shakir, was in the backfield, was literally still such a waste of a guy that you can't even use. And then 2 of the 3 routes were going 15 yards down the field. You should know the tendency that Spagnuolo is bringing, and the fact that they've already been getting to Josh without even having to blitz. Of course, Josh is going to be under pressure and is not going to have time to throw. How in the world you're not drawing up a play where Josh has 2 or 3 quick outlets that he can get the ball to instead of having to pedal backwards for 5 yards and just chuck it up and throw an amazing pass while chucking it up? But he shouldn't have been in that position. Joe Brady did a really poor job in that game.
The one part I disagree with you is on the Shakir in the flat. There's no one on that whole side of the field except for Shakir. So if he had taken that check down to the little orbit route Shakir was on, he had 70 yards to run with nobody there. But I think the pressure got there too fast for him to even
realize
that far down.
When they snapped, he was still standing behind him.
Yeah, I mean, those guys literally wouldn't have taken more time if there were no offensive linemen there at all. I mean, it was literally as soon as they're out their stance, they're already past the O-lineman. Like it was just a complete breakdown, and unfortunate it happened in the most crucial moment, and then at the end of it,
but that's the difference between champs and, I said it last week. The Chiefs know they're going to win because they know they're going to execute when it matters most. And the Bills hope they're going to win, and they hope they're going to execute. And we see time and again, when it matters most, the Chiefs execute.
Well, and by the way, the other thing that Andy Reid leaned into was getting Mahomes on the run, because the Bills just seemed to forget how to play defense whenever Mahomes was scrambling. I mean, there was the first rushing touchdown that he had, they were so scared that he was going to dump it to somebody that they could only feel and not see behind them. There were like 3 defenders between him and the end zone.
That play is actually the same play they got the rushing touchdown on earlier in the game. And it's the Mahomes option to keep it. And I do think they bit on the running back who had scored before.
Well, 100%. But if you watch that, there were no receivers behind them. There were just 3 defenders that were scared. There was someone they didn't see, so they kind of hung back and let them just prance into the end zone in front of them. And they were just in no man's land, not guarding anybody. Like if one of
well, and how many naked bootlegs did Mahomes have in that game? There was 3 or 4 of them, and every time
wide open,
there was no one on that side of the field. You would have thought after the second time. Now I'm guessing the Bills didn't have a spy because they were trying to bracket and take away Kelsey. Right? You can't do both. You can't afford to have 2 linebackers trying to lock down Kelsey and have a spy on Mahomes. You have to pick and choose. But when Mahomes keeps killing you on these third downs, on these naked boots, and is rolling out, and no one's there, where of any kind of adjustment? I felt like throughout the game, the Chiefs moved the ball mostly with ease. And to the Bills' credit, things were really difficult. They moved and they scored, but things just seemed so much harder for Buffalo.
Well, one stat I didn't think we'd see in this game, Mahomes outrushed Josh Allen. That can't happen if you're the Bills. Like, you're not out there to outthrow the Chiefs. And whether it's Josh Allen or somebody, you have to have a running game. And I know, Rob, you've talked about it before, but this to me looked kind of like the AFC title game last year when the Ravens forgot to run the ball. The Bills came out and didn't run the ball at all, which the whole thing with this Bills teams had been, but this time they can run the ball. This time they can run the ball. And the whole first quarter of this game was Josh Allen throwing should-be interceptions that it looked like the Josh Allen of old.
At halftime, why am I blanking on the running back? James Cook. At halftime, James Cook had 4 rushes for 23 yards. He had 1 catch. So he had 5 touches in the first half. And like you said,
averaging 5 yards a carry.
Yeah, and he's actually, and he was picking up yards. Yeah, there was a couple where he didn't, but like if you built this team and hey, we finally have the identity, we're going to run the football, we're going to keep Mahomes on the sideline, and then you come out and you don't attack it. It's almost like maybe Joe Brady thought, okay, they know we're going to try to run, so they're going to stack the box and try to take him away. So we're going to try to trick him and just come out and sling the ball around the yard. But it's like when you were running the ball, you found some success, and then in the second half, when you did run the ball consistently, you picked up chunk yardage consistently on the ground. And Rob, you touched on it. In the playoffs, the Chiefs have shown, propensity for giving up some yards on the ground, unlike we saw for most of the regular season. So I just thought all around, it was a really poorly managed, poorly coached performance from Buffalo. And then you pair that with the execution when it matters most. And, unfortunately for most football fans, you get the same result, which is the Chiefs are heading back to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, the 3 keys to the game as far as mismatches for me in this order were, number 1, the Chiefs D-line versus the Bills O-line. I thought they just absolutely blew up the whole game. And it doesn't matter if it was pressure every play, but it was pressure every crucial play, every conversion, every single time it mattered, they got there. The second one was the coaching disparity. I mean, Sean McDermott and Joe Brady got absolutely shellacked by Andy Reid and Spagnuolo in every single way, from schematics to adjustments. They got shellacked. And then the third one is that Mahomes is better than Josh Allen. So, I mean, it just is what it is.
Mahomes looks like he's better than everybody. Oh, yeah, I think that's a valid point.
Even though, like, Josh Allen, once again, it's like it's hard to put much of the loss on him. Like, he
didn't make any mistakes.
He
didn't make any mistakes. Like, I mean, he did have the fumble or two, but he recovered it. But he didn't hurt his team the same way that a lot of these other quarterbacks have gone against Mahomes or just against each other and hurt their team. I mean, that's why it's different than the Ravens-Bills game, where you're like, people are upset putting some of the blame on Lamar because of one final drive, or I guess you could say one half of doing well. Well, it's like, he put his team in the hole. Josh Allen didn't put his team in the hole. And in fact, Mahomes at one point in the first half looked like he was having an uncharacteristically messy set of drives. So, I mean, it just worked out overall, and the better team won.
Well, speaking of that, is this now? Let's say they win this week or next week. Does this become the greatest team ever? I know that the Patriots dynasty lasted way longer, but you're kind of talking about multiple groups of different guys other than Tom Brady. But I mean, winning 3 straight Super Bowls, is there a team you put ahead of them as a better team?
Well, what is the greatest team ever? Because the team's different every year, and this Chiefs team especially has changed the way they played over the last couple of years. So I mean, it's not. I don't think they're the greatest team ever, because they're not even the same team they were 2 years ago. So it's like, I mean, the greatest team ever to me is still the Patriots team that didn't finish the job. Or
for a single season, you could. I mean, I agree. I think that might be the best individual team I ever saw. I mean, they outscored their opponents by like 450 points that year. Like, it was ridiculous. They were winning 50-10 on a weekly basis that year. But like you said, they didn't finish the job. If you're looking at like dynasties, if you're asking like, is this the most impressive dynasty, which if they win, they will have 3 straight and 4 in 6 years with also a Super Bowl loss in there as well. Now it's like, I certainly think you can make that argument because both of those Patriots, it was 2 separate times with entirely different players. There's at least a handful of players on this Chiefs team that have been through, all of this together. And so like, maybe you go back to the Steelers in the 70s, they won 4 in 6 years. Most of those defensive players were all the same and were there for most of that time. But it's at the very least, it warrants the discussion because to be able to do what they're doing, and if, we've never seen a team win 3 straight, it's really difficult. We've never even seen a team that won the first 2 make a 3rd straight Super Bowl, and now we have.
Yeah, I mean, like I'd say maybe the best team I've seen, we'll go Super Bowl winning teams would be those Cowboys in the early 90s, just so even on defense and offense and so balanced on offense for passing and running the ball. But I've never seen any team hold it together this line. Rob, you talked about they don't even play the same way. That's kind of what's impressive to me is they haven't dropped the ball. They're still winning Super Bowls while adjusting on the fly. And if they win their 4th out of 5, that's a run we haven't seen before, other than the Steelers.
Yeah, I guess my problem was more with the question than like the concept. It's like,
yeah,
like it's the greatest
question to stir things up for sure.
Is it the greatest run ever? Yeah, because as we talked about, they changed their identity and didn't stop going to Super Bowls and winning Super Bowls. And I don't know
15-1 too.
Well, but I don't think we've ever seen a team truly flip their identity and not miss a beat when it matters, which is crazy, And
a credit to the coaching staff and the job that they do to get their players prepared and the GM. The operation as a whole, it's pretty damn impressive. And it's now obviously become fitting that it is, they just captured the Lamar Hunt Trophy. And it's like, it makes sense that it should be named the Lamar Hunt Trophy with the way this team is playing these days.
All right. Well, we're not going to get into actually going through the Super Bowl until our show next week. We got to have something to talk about. But let's go ahead and step back and look at some of the coaching moves we're seeing here around the NFL. This has been a huge 2 weeks as far as teams taking up new coaches, letting go old coaches. Sometimes teams keep it a coach and then he leaves. We'll get to it, but I have ranked these coaches in power rankings as far as the best new coaching hires of the year. Let's start off with the Bears getting Ben Johnson on the Lions. I think it's a good fit. Offensive coach, finally, for the Bears. Kendall, we'll talk about that in a second, I'm sure. But going to a team with offensive weapons, Kendall, is this a guy who can turn the Bears around and right this ship?
Well, it's funny. Like, I feel like everyone outside of the Chicago Bears organization has known for 40 years now, but certainly the last 10 to 20 years since the league has changed to become more of an offense-oriented league, that, they should probably try to, like, build an offense one of these days, maybe get a quarterback, maybe get some talent in there, maybe get an offensive head coach. But no, they've had defensive head coaches for 40 years. I feel like the organization has just been living in the aura of that 85 Bears defense for almost a half century now. And it's about damn time that they are finally leaning into where the league has gone. And we watched what Ben Johnson was able to do in Detroit. Do I expect it to just be like a switch that flips on? No, not necessarily. But you have some raw talent at quarterback, and no one's going to deny that Caleb Williams is extremely talented. He certainly is. And they have some weapons in place. So you got to like the move for sure.
Yeah, and I think if you were paying attention, you knew that this is what was going to happen. Like, if you were paying attention, you knew that Ben Johnson was not going to go anywhere else other than the Bears. And this division is going to be, again, I thought it was one of the most interesting divisions coming into this year with all the moves being made. And I think it's, again, going to be really interesting in a different way, which is that the Lions lost their entire coaching staff, basically, except for their head coach. And their best coach, in my opinion, went to the Bears, their rival. So it'll be really interesting to see if the Lions can maintain anywhere near their level of success, which is not as guaranteed as I think maybe people think. And let's see if the Bears can make. I'm interested to see, and I believe in Caleb, and I think I can see a big jump in year 2. Now, obviously, a big jump from a pretty mediocre year for what was hailed as a generational prospect is not really a bold take. But I'm going to put his flaws and kind of, he looked a little broken at times. And I'm going to put that on dysfunctional franchise and coaching, because what the last couple of years in the NFL has shown over and over and over again, too much evidence to ignore, is that these these high draft pick quarterbacks thrown into the fire in bad franchises, like they just don't get a chance to show who they really are until they're put in a better situation. So, he's going to be going on his third offensive coordinator in his second season already. So hopefully this is the guy.
All right. Well, we got a couple AFC East coaches moving in. We've got Mike Vrabel going to the Patriots, Aaron Glenn going to the Jets. I know Patriots fans might not be too happy with taking a defensive coach, but then you also got to consider Mike Vrabel might be a better receiver than anyone on the Patriots roster right now. I think he's got 2 Super Bowl receiving touchdowns.
Well, I'll kick it off since I'm the resident Pats fan.
You got to love
as
this,
much
right?
as I love, to be honest, no, I don't. I feel like it's a retread. It's looking back into the past, and the league has changed for one, and we need someone that's going to be able to develop Drake May,
Pro Bowl quarterback Drake May.
Yeah, that's another wild development. But there is such a lack of talent there, and Mike Vrabel is a great culture builder. We saw it at Tennessee, and I'm not at all surprised that we saw him succeed the way he did. And he got the Titans to the AFC Championship. They were a 1 seed one year. Like, he is a good football coach, I believe. I just don't think he's the right man for this job at this time. There is just so many holes. Maybe if we can actually hit a couple of home runs in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round and actually get some talent in that building, and he can hire the right assistant coaches. But for me personally, I was looking to go offensive, so someone that could really work specifically with Drake May, because I'm not completely sold on May at this point. I need to see more to be certain that he's the quarterback of the future, which if you want to ultimately succeed in this league, I feel like you almost have to have these days. And I don't know if we're going to see that with Vrabel at the helm, and we might be in the same spot 2 years from now where we're still not sure.
That's a good point, Kendall. I'm not even a Pats fan or anything, but I just loved the idea of Vrabel coming home to the Patriots. I thought that was a natural fit. But you're right in the sense of that hopefully he's evolved a little bit from his Titans days, because he doesn't have a Derrick Henry. So hopefully he doesn't do that thing that he did where he didn't care about Tannehill doing anything more other than managing the game and not making mistakes, because you're going to need May to be a superhero for this team. And Drake May is interesting because I really liked him, and he still was a rookie and made some back-breaking mistakes and stuff, but you see the promise in the player. But I don't know if I've ever seen national narratives around a quarterback give someone the benefit of the doubt based on how bad they perceive the rest of his team to be. As in, they prop him up so much, a little bit more than what the tape says or what happens if you watch the game. And it's solely based on the fact that they thought the team was crap. I think no one was willing to say it, but I think everybody kind of knew Gerard Mayo was in over his head. And they just kind of assumed that everything around was so awful that the fact he's even doing just this must mean he's incredible. I just don't think I've ever seen the benefit of the doubt be given that way.
All right. Well, what about the Jets, though? Also bringing in a former player of their team. Now, he's actually had quite a good stint here with the Lions as defensive coordinator, but Aaron Glenn going to the Jets, is that something that can help that team, or is that team too much of a mess?
They have the personnel to do exactly what he wants to do. He's a defensive guy that loves to run man cover defense, and they have the guys that you can just rush forward with, the pass rush, and they have Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed, and those guys can genuinely press and play press man and do what he wants. And Kendall, you touched on the fact it's an offensive driven league now, and you kind of want to see your offense. You kind of want to see your head coach be offensive, because what else happens, right? If you have a defensive head coach, no matter how good he is, you get an offensive coordinator in there, and if he's good, he's a head coach the next year. So you get no stability and do all that. So, I love the fit, and there's got to be a place for these defensive head coaches to go. But it's the Jets, so
I will note one guy in there, DJ Reed, is a free agent, so we're not sure he's going to be on the Jets next year. But let's keep moving here. Raiders grabbing Hall of Fame coach Pete Carroll. Obviously, they don't have the personnel some of these other teams have, but I would argue that might make the AFC West right now the most prestigious list of coaches we've ever seen in the division.
Well,
Sean
first
Payton,
we have to
Pete
wait
Carroll,
for Pete
Andy
Carroll to
Reid.
get out of. We have to wait for Pete Carroll to get out of line, the line for his AARP card. He's 76 years old. He's almost as old as our president now. Which is
feels
wild
young,
to
though.
think. We'll see.
He's 73, by the way.
Okay, that's getting up there for NFL head coaches these days. You don't normally see that all too often. I mean, that's, it's a great name to go snag, but knowing that division, am I really expecting him to change that culture or them to contend in that division? Not whatsoever.
I'm a little bit more optimistic. This to me seems like, so they grabbed the Bucs' longtime assistant GM John Spytek, who was the leader of our personnel and scouting department, and whether you guys want to admit it or not, the Bucs are one of the best drafting teams in the NFL. So it's a big deal because they're bringing in. I don't think they see Pete Carroll as like they're going to all of a sudden turn around in 2 years and the Raiders are going to win a Super Bowl. I think they want this guy to instill a culture, bring these guys back because all these Raiders players know is losing. So bring these guys back. He's always been a ego and psychological coach, a positive guy, comes from the college days. And that combined with John Spytek, if he can show that type of drafting and scouting acumen he showed on the Bucs, in a couple of years, this team could look very different. And mental goes a long way. So I'm pretty optimistic about this. I thought it was an interesting pick at first. I wasn't expecting it, but the coaching cycle outside of the top guys like Ben Johnson and stuff, it wasn't that great. So I don't think they did a disservice to their team at all by picking this guy who, by nature of his actual age, will only be able to coach for a couple years before they can build the roster up, build a good culture behind the scenes, and then prep themselves for a superstar coach when the next cycle comes.
Well, what about going down the list here? We got the Cowboys picking up Brian Schottenheimer, not the big name that they have been rumored to grab. Is anybody can see the logic in how this is better than Mike McCarthy?
Nobody but Jerry.
It's weird, every once in a while, I don't really know how accomplished Brian truly was as an assistant. I know he's had a number of jobs.
He was not.
But yeah, I didn't think so either. And, his father was a really solid head coach. I thought his father got a raw deal with the Chargers back in the day when they fired him after 15-1. But that's about the extent of the accomplishments I feel like that this Schottenheimer has is being related to his father. So to suddenly now be the head coach of the biggest brand in the sport and one of the biggest brands in the world is got to be kind of a kick in the nuts for Cowboys fans, to be honest.
Yeah, Jerry's losing it. He never had it, but he's losing
what he never had.
He's losing what he never had, man. I mean, because this is a pretty bad pick in my opinion. I mean, there's a reason why this guy stayed at the level of coaching he's been at for just like a decade, but it's another thing where Jerry can exert control and power over his coach and team, and we've all seen how that plays out. So if I'm a Cowboys player, I gotta be just super bummed. But no, not more bummed than if I'm a Saints player, because
moving down the list, our next best coaching hire is the Saints have hired no one. They cannot find someone to take that job.
Well, I mean, objectively, right? I'm the resident Bucs fan. Yes, I hate the Saints. That's whatever. I'm going to lay all those cards on the table. But at the same time, just even objectively, as someone that knows football, they're a horrible situation for a head coach, especially someone like Cliff Kingsbury was in the mix at one point, but he's got maybe one more shot at being a head coach. And the shot you don't want to take is on the Saints, where they are in, because of their strategy throughout all the Drew Brees years, where they thought they were revolutionizing the cap manipulation, and they were at the time before everyone caught up and started doing it as well, where they kept kicking the can down the road, putting it on the credit card. The problem is that they're gonna have like $200+ million in dead cap over these next couple of years, and unfortunately, you would think that means that their roster is like really young and they're on like low contracts and stuff. No, they have old, decrepit players that the team is falling
way too
apart.
much for.
Yeah, they're paying way too much for. They just paid. Now look, I like Alvin Kamara. He's a great player, but he's a 30-year-old running back that you just paid like tons of millions of dollars in like a 4-year contract or something. Like it's crazy. Their idea, and really the biggest thing, their biggest mistake on top of pushing the can down the road is that like a year or two ago, it was pretty obvious to all of us that they weren't going anywhere, and they had an opportunity to eat all of that, or eat a lot of it, or eat into it, and they chose to like pay Derek Carr all this money and like just dig deeper in the hole. So now they're just one of the least desirable situations and opportunities for a head coach that I can remember.
Yeah, well, I think that speaks to why. I was going to say, and that speaks to why here we are. We're on the eve of the Super Bowl almost, and they still don't have a coach. Because like you said, who wants that job? You don't want that to be your first-time head coaching position.
Nobody wants that on their resume.
Get a second chance. And if you're one of the guys like Kingsbury, who you've already, or McDaniel, You're
for
like
Mike
one
McCarthy.
of those guys that you had a couple of tries,
like,
you might
I'll
only have
wait.
one shot left. And going there, it's almost a guarantee that you're a cellar dweller and the team is going to be a dumpster fire for the foreseeable future. So yeah, they're in a really, really tough spot.
I mean, the guy that I saw they're interviewing last is Kellen Moore, which is so interesting because Kellen Moore, like, I would have thought that he would have come back to the Cowboys. Like, I would have thought that he would have been the guy to come back to the Cowboys. The year he worked with Dak, it was like their best offensive output ever. So It's really interesting. That speaks to the relationship that he either has or doesn't have with Jerry. You forget how important these relationships are, and so it's interesting now. Like, I don't even know, will he take the job if they offer it? I mean, they're desperate. They'll offer anybody. Like,
Yeah,
you know what I
I'm
mean?
open. I'm open if they're hiring. Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, I'll take the job.
Shit,
So then
yeah,
slotting in,
even if it's one and done, I'll take that. I'll
slotting
be, I'll
in
be
here. We got one spot below, no coach. We have the Jaguars hiring Liam
Nope, we're done.
Cohen. Oh, Rob, we know we want your opinion on this more than anything. I slated him after no coach just for you. It may be the worst first week we've ever seen for an NFL coach. Should the Jaguars just move on already? 2 weeks ago, Rob, this guy was the future savior of your franchise. Is there hope he can overcome this rocky transition and actually mold something in Jacksonville?
I mean, I will say my thoughts on this have changed as the days went on. Things were a little bit heightened at the time. We live in a world too where there's like minute by minute reporting, and it can kind of dramatize the events and as fans take you on like basically an unnecessary ride. Look, I'll never fault someone for going for a promotion and getting money. This is like generational wealth for your family and all that stuff like that. But there is a very limited code of conduct in business and code of ethics that you need to live by. I mean, business at its base, yes, you make moves and it's not all emotion and it's not about friendships. But at the end of the day, you can't go far in business without relationships. And the aftermath of the burned relationships that he has within the Bucs building speak volumes to me more than like the fans' upheaval or how people want to misconstrue things. I'm not going to get into...
Wait, Rob. So you mean like telling your employer that you're at your kid's doctor's office while you're hopping a plane to Jacksonville is not like morally okay?
Yeah, I was going to
His kid had a doctor's appointment at some point.
I was going to limit the amount of personal
Detail.
matter lying that he did, but yeah, it's pretty sickening to think. And they came out and they said, yeah, our kid does have an autoimmune disease, and it's like, yeah, that makes it almost worse.
It really does. It really does.
It makes it almost
I'd rather
worse
you
than-
made up a disorder
excuse.
than it's like, oh, we got our sick kid here. Use him.
Yeah, and it was pretty tough. And so I will say to get back on track though, look, I was never in the camp of firing Bowles and hiring Liam Cohen because he had 1 year of experience doing this, and yes, he brought our offense to newer heights, and it looked great. But being a coordinator and being a head coach are completely different. And when this whole saga went down, then fans of prior organizations and places he's been started to come out and give testimony to a concerning character pattern where he's kind of really reneged on a lot of commitments, made public statements, didn't follow through. He basically burned Kentucky football twice in 3 years, where he went there, said he was going to stay, then jumped to the Rams, then came back the next year again, held a press conference saying, I'm staying this time. And then I didn't even know this. And then hopped on a flight and signed with the Bucs. So, I mean, it's like, I didn't know any of that. And, that would have been a little concerning. But look, when you're head coach of a struggling franchise, players don't know winning. You have a lot on your plate. He has unprecedented power for a first-time head coach, which is picking your own boss for a GM, which is crazy. This guy created himself a mountain of responsibilities, and unfortunately for him, based on the way he handled the entire situation, he better adjust on the fly, and he better win pretty quickly out of the gate. Because if things look bad, or if things start to go south, in this day and age of social media and internet, I mean, it's going to be ruthless. It's going to be ruthless. So it's an interesting time for him, and I was pretty upset as a fan just because I wanted him as a coordinator. I didn't want him as a head coach. But to be honest, like, I'm over it now. And in our office, at least at the Bucks, has shown that we know how to pick out talent at the coordinator position. So it's one of those things where we're moving on. And look,
well, I want to talk about it from the Jags perspective, though. Like,
sure,
personally, I think this was maybe the best thing they could have done because they don't have much else to lose at this point. Their offense, we've watched Trevor Lawrence go from becoming the Heisman Trophy, unbelievable college quarterback at Clemson, who he ripped apart Bama's defense a couple times in title games. He goes to the pros. He looks like, all right, he has a rookie season that's so-so, but, he's a rookie quarterback. And then he ascends the second year, and you're like, okay, he's not Spicoli. He's actually going to be a legit quarterback. And then he falls flat, as does our entire offense, and it's complete dysfunction in Jacksonville. And we watched what Liam Cohen was able to do, as you talked about, with this offense in Tampa. And Baker Mayfield had been somewhat left for dead and was a backup, essentially, at a couple of organizations. And he had by far the best year of his career. You could argue maybe the best season of any NFC quarterback this year. And now Liam Cohen gets to work with at least a highly talented prospect or product at quarterback. Now, there's obviously a lot of other pieces that they're going to need to fulfill, and he's going to have to do take on a different role of responsibility as the head coach. But he has a quarterback in place, and he's in the right division to see some success relatively soon. So for those reasons, if I'm Shaq Khan or Amir Khan, I think it's about as good as he was going to do. Yeah.
Well, and remember when you guys looked at me funny when I said that I would actually take Brian Thomas Jr. over Malik Neighbors next year in fantasy? It's starting to look like it won't be such a bad pick. I mean, I would have done it. I would have done it anyway. I would have done it anyway still. But there's the personnel on offensive side because Travis Etienne can be unlocked too. I mean, he's a dual threat running back, and he looks like something psychological was going on this year. He looked like he kind of wasn't living up or showing what he's shown physically in the past. So yeah, there's a lot of interest there on the offensive side. I mean, now look, the Jaguars fans, what's interesting about that is that they're obviously stoked. I mean, they feel like they got a guy. But more than that, some of them are saying even if it goes down in flames, it's still a huge win because it got Trent Baalke out of the building. So I mean, I don't even think any of it really matters to a fan base that knows no winning anyway. They just saw the biggest problem and he was gone. So
what's crazy to me is this feels like this is one phone call away of saying, hey, I'm changing my mind or I need some more time to think, from this being the first or second best coaching hire of the offseason. And everybody being, if you make that phone call to just say, hey guys, I know I committed, but they're backing the Brinks truck up. I got to go look and see how much is in the Brinks truck. I don't think anybody's going to blame you for that. But not making that one phone call changed the entire scope of how this is viewed right now.
This is what happened from the Jags' perspective. When we get to training camp, no one in that Jags organization is going to be talking about that.
No, if you come out and win 2 games, no one will remember this at all.
Yes. No, dude, I mean, in a very shortened sense, he ghosted the organization for 24 hours, then talked to Bowles and said he was with his sick kid at a doctor's office, and, oh, hey, while I'm in Jacksonville, I might want to talk to them a little bit, the whole time being in the Jacksonville building. And it was only 15 minutes after he told Bowles that then he came out and made a statement to the media that, oh, no, he had informed Bowles and the organization that he was doing the Jags interview. So, I mean, it was just, look, no one cares. I mean, no one would be mad. They'd be only disappointed at most if he had left. It's just about how you handle things. That's life. It's not always about what you're doing or what you're saying. It's how you say them and how you do them. I mean, that's just a fact of life.
Well, I mean, that takes us all the way through our coaching tree, which I guess takes us through this conference title game recap. We will be back next week with our Super Bowl preview. We're going to go in depth on the big game there. But until then, for Robb Hue and Kendall Capps, I'm Drew James. This has been the Winning Play Podcast. Go out there and make some winning plays.